Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. It's been far too long, but it's time for a My Thoughts on video. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and that is, well, I've explained that in a recent video, so I won't bother with repeating it. So, today I want to cast our minds back around about a month and go back to November. And that event that I want to talk about is the Black Library Weekender for 2019, because we saw an awful lot at this event. My original conception when I recorded the first take, which I then had to delete because the audio bugged out, was that this wasn't a very dense event. Some really cool stuff, but it wasn't all that dense. Then I actually read the article and realised just how dense this show was. There is so much in this show. It is ridiculous, quite frankly, how much stuff is coming from Black Library. So, without any further ado, let's dive in. So we start off by seeing the new Sisters of Silence miniature. We'll get to that. But the opening reveal was Warhammer Crime. Something they haven't really previewed much yet, but it is something I'm definitely looking forward to. So Warhammer Horror came out in this says 2018. Blooming heck, where did 2019 go? And Warhammer Horror seems to have been a big success. It's not for me. Horror is not my genre in film or in literature, but it did have a large appeal, and there's some more reveals for it later. But they've decided to add in a slightly different aspect of the 41st millennium. Rather than going full-on creepy horror, they've gone for the politicking and the manoeuvring and the gang wars and all of the things like that around, well, the criminal underworlds of the 41st millennium with Warhammer Crime. So it talks about arbitrators, detectives, gangsters, administratum officials, thugs, and all sorts of things going on. And this is something I would read. I don't read a huge amount of crime thriller, but the little bits I have read from, I think Joe Nesbo is the main author that I could probably come back to. What I have read, I did enjoy. So I'm interested to give this one a go. I don't know if it's something that will entice me to buy the entire range as it comes out, but it's certainly one I'm going to look at. And it says it's going to launch in July with Bloodlines by Chris Raitt. So, interesting series and definitely one to keep an eye on. But Chris Raitt has been very busy, as he's also brought us, well, the second Watchers of the Throne novel. I'll scroll back up in a moment. So, Watchers of the Throne, The Regent's Shadow, sequel to The Emperor's Legion. And whilst I admittedly cannot remember exactly where Emperor's Legion ends off, I know that Watchers of the Throne received a huge amount of plaudits. It's a very good book, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes next now that they're in The Regent's Shadow. That Regent, I assume, is Guilliman, so maybe, hot take, these are going to be the purges of terror that Guilliman actually launched in order to get a safe launching off point for the Indomitus Crusade. That's my hot take best guess. I don't know, it's not really a hot take, it's a month ago, but that's my guess from not remembering if there's been an interview with Chris Raitt since. And they've decided that Valerian and Alea, the starring characters, the ones on that front cover, got their own miniatures. She's something we've seen a bit before, with particularly Gotrek, I think is the best example. And the Sister of Silence, Alea, fine. It's a Sister of Silence, looks like a Sister of Silence. I nearly said sounds like one, but she doesn't talk. So yeah, absolutely fine. The Custodian, the arm bugs me. I don't get it. It just looks far too weedy. And I'm sure there's a plot reason that I can't remember or don't know from the Emperor's Legion as to why he's got such a weedy gloved arm as opposed to actual proper armour. But it just looks odd. Same with the head, which is so gaunt, it's almost Space Wolfy. And not the sort of bulkier heads that you usually get with the Custodians like Trajan Valoris or Constantine Veldor. Not that there's anything wrong with this miniature in general, because a pared down custodian, where it's a little bit beyond a standard custodian, but it's not the ostentatious ridiculousness that was Valdor. It's a really nice design, just a few things that always throw me, but that's probably just me. It's not a fair reflection probably on the miniature as a rule. So what else have we got? Well, an awful lot, so I'm going to keep accelerating. So, at the event, I think you were able to pick up First Wall, as well as Lord of the First, which is the Lionel Johnson Primark novel by David Geimer. Now, I'm a huge fan of David Geimer's work. Court of the Blind King, I believe, is on pre-order now, and I'm going to get it. And I'm a huge fan of the Hamilcar Bear-Eater stuff, the Ideneth stuff in general, though I know the Iron Hands work, whilst it's been memed a lot, wasn't as hugely critically successful as, say, Hamilcar has been. So I'll be interested to see that one from the Lionel Johnson novel, and where it fits amongst the Primark series that has definitely been a mixed bag, shall we say. It's been a mixed bag. So get a rebranded cover of Horus Rising. We'll come back to Horus Rising, I suspect. And then we get a little bit more stuff. So a Cal Jericho short, full novel. Sinner's Bounty was there. And Oaths and Conquest. This is the third set of mini-stories for Age of Sigmar. There was Gods and Mortals, Myths and Revenants, and now this. This is a really useful thing, because I've read both of those. In fact, Gods and Mortals was probably my launching off point for much of my AOS lore understanding, because AOS 2 was out, so I had the rulebook and I'd read the background lore, but I never explored the factions in any depth, aside from the factions that I personally was collecting, that being Stormcast, Daughters of Cain, and Ideneth Deepkin at the time. So Gods and Mortals, for me, was a great introduction to a lot of the other factions in the game, like the Free Peoples, who were the Free Peoples at the time and have now become Cities of Sigmar, the Slaves to Darkness, the Khorne Bloodbound, Neferata and the new version of Neferata, and that continued in Myths and Revenants, where the Ideneth made their debut, the Kharadron got a lot of time in the spotlight, and there was all sorts of stuff in there, and I cannot recommend that series enough. But there is another thing for getting started, and we'll come to that later in the video. As well as that, you've got the anniversary edition of 13th Legion, the penal 13th Legion, Colonel Schaefer's Last Chances. And they are iconic, they are legends, really. It's almost a shame. Actually, are penal Legion in 40k Legends for Imperial Guard? If they're not, they definitely should be. So if they're not, address that, please. Reader's Choice has decided to return Iron Company, another Chris Wright novel, and one that I never read but do know was quite popular, and Hell's Reach by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Hell's Reach is an icon. Hell's Reach genuinely is one of the greatest Black Library novels of all time, in my very, very, very biased opinion, because it was the first novel I ever read. But Hell's Reach, I've never heard anyone trash talk Hell's Reach, and it was so popular that there was a team of animators who went and made a full animated series off their own backs out of that book, so good that GW basically hired them to make the new Blood Angels animation. So that's how popular and good Hell's Reach is. So it's great to see Hell's Reach back. Very much approve. And we carry on. Horus Heresy. We've got the first wall. We're talking about that on Imperialis Podcasters at the moment. So there was a short discussion on this week's show, if you want to go and watch it on the channel. And on the Christmas Day show, which is going to be Remlays, myself, and a guest who I will not reveal at this time, we're going to be talking about the first wall, hopefully in full discussion, full plot, full spoilers. So if you are interested in that, look forward to that. But we also got the details of Heresy Book 4. And Heresy Book 4 is Saturnine, being written by none other than Dan Abnett. Now, there's a small hint in First Wall about what Saturnine actually is in reference to. My first guess was the Saturnine fleet, which is a very well-known pre-Great Crusade fleet that was basically rolled in during the Great Crusade and never lost. So I thought it was going to be that. I can't remember exactly what the details are for Saturnine in terms of the Siege of Terror, but it's going to be written. I think this is the important bit, by Dan Abnett. Now that you might say, okay, fine, Dan Abnett's a great author, so why not? The reason why not is most people assume Dan Abnett was going to write the last book. Because, as I mentioned earlier, Dan Abnett wrote Horus Rising. The very, very first Horus Heresy novel was written by Dan Abnett. So people sort of got in their heads that Abnett was going to write Siege Book 8 and basically bookend the series with Dan Abnett and Garviel Loken and Horus, and he starts it, he ends it, lovely. That's what people sort of assumed, and I was one of them. But that's been proven to be false. It's not happening. So I think the most common next guess for the final author is Aaron Dembski-Bowden, because ADB wrote Master of Mankind, the Emperor's sort of breakout novel, if you will, and so he knows the Emperor's backstory better than probably anybody else, aside from like maybe John Blanshaw, whoever else comes up with the old original lore. To be fair, ADB probably knows it better than anybody. And he also wrote Black Legion and Talon of Horus, sort of the Abaddon Sons of Horus Black Legion origin story about the morph of the Sons of Horus Legion we now know today. So he knows both the primary protagonist, that being the Emperor, and the antagonist of the future, that being Abaddon, better than almost anyone, so it makes sense for him to write it and finish it off. So I'm looking forward to that very, very much indeed. We will see if that turns out to be the case, but my money's on ADB, we'll see. That's Sons of the Selenar, which is Graham McNeil's short. Right, Warhammer 40,000. Plenty to dive into here as well. So, first off, I mentioned the Last Chances a few minutes ago. They're back! The Last Chances are back for 15 years after the last book in the series. They are returning in Armageddon Saint. So we don't know exactly when this takes place. I mean, Armageddon suggests, well, Armageddon. My best guess is that this is when Armageddon goes basically to flip. So this is the outbreak of the Great Rift and the effect that has on Armageddon with demonic assaults and eventually the attempted summoning of Angron, which is mostly credited with the Space Marines for thwarting that, but maybe the Last Chances have their role to play in all this as well. So that would be my guess, again, willing to be corrected. We also get the return of another legend in their own right, Ephrael Stern, the Sister of Battle who, well, is definitely not just a Sister of Battle anymore. Demonifuge is a name you probably know, even if you don't know why you know it. It's a graphic novel, and it's being redone and re-released very, very soon. And in 2020, David Annandale is going to add to the story of Ephrael Stern with The Heretic Saint. And I very much look forward to that because I know how good David Annandale is. I've read some of the Neferata stuff at the very least, and I think I've read some of his 40k fiction as well, though I can't remember its name off the top of my head. I feel like I've read some stuff of his, but I can't remember which ones are his. So that's kind of bad on my part. Sorry, David. But there was more, of course. So, limited edition for Astaroth, Angel of Mercy. So, another Blood Angels novel by Guy Haley, who is, of course, doing Darkness in the Blood. And that reminds me, since Darkness in the Blood is one of those mega editions, so is the Heretic Saint. That's going to be a mega edition with all the bells and whistles like Spear of the Emperor and Darkness in the Blood got. So that's great. And we also get John French's Horus Wars novel, Incarnation, is getting a limited edition, which is very, very nice indeed. Good to know. Then we move on to arguably... Oh god, let's just start with this. So, Warriors and Warlords. This is the equivalent to Oaths and Conquests. It's a series of 40k mini-shorts. I've not read the predecessors to this, so I don't know how good they are. I'll be completely frank with you. but if they're anything near the level of the AOS ones, they're probably very, very good. Fist of the Imperium, latest Space Marine Conquest book. It's a Primaris librarian doing badass things. What more do you want? I'm sure it'll be an interesting read, but it doesn't make me want to go out and buy it, per se. It's just, it's there, and it's kind of cool. Then we have Fabius Bile Manflayer, the third book in the Fabius Bile series by Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds recently went on record to say that he actually despised Fabius Bile, which to me just shows how good of an author and how professional of an author Josh Reynolds is, that he can make a character that he hates, and to be fair, I think we're supposed to hate, into a character that we can both love and hate. So, yeah, well done Josh Reynolds, and Fabius Bile Manflayer will be along not too far into the future. I look forward to seeing exactly what shenanigans he's up to, especially if we're in a post-Great Rift world. Maybe we're going Primaris hunting. I don't know, we'll see. And then it's in the middle of your screen, and for good reason, Farsight, Empire of Lies. Right. You knew I was going to bang on about this one. I read Crisis of Faith, the original book by Phil Kelly. Remlays very kindly gave me his copy. And it's amazing. Genuinely, Crisis of Faith is one of the best books I've read. And I know I'm biased because I'm a Farsight player, and my character sort of is a Tau who works for the Farsight Enclaves. I've got a huge bias towards Commander Farsight. But Crisis of Faith is brilliant, with the evident betrayal with Aun Vath that sort of is spelled out but also ignored, to the introduction of demonically possessed Tau, to the expansion of Ovesa and his developments, and Oblotai, the original development of sort of who would become most of the eight, with the presence of a Bright Sword, Oblotai. Ovesa doesn't fight in there, but you know what I mean. Oshova, and just the beginnings of the eight, and Shavastos is there as well. So it's just really, really awesome. And Empire of Lies, from what I recall, is the Arthas Moloch story, i.e. the point at which the Farsight Enclaves form. Warchief Grog has done his damage, he's been driven off, or more accurately, he hasn't been driven off yet, he's retreating on some sort of feint, it seems, and has split his forces. Farsight went to Atari Vo, then he went to Arthas Moloch, and got the Dawnblade, met demons, fought demons, saw the warp, saw chaos, and basically decided that he was the greatest danger, the greater good there was. So, yeah, my expectations are up here, Phil Kelly. Not in a bad way, but because you set such a good standard with Crisis of Faith, and because I have a huge bias toward Commander Farsight, I have really high expectations for Empire of Lies, and I will be snap buying it. You can rest assured, as soon as I get a chance to go to my local G-Dubs when that comes out, I'm buying it. No argument. I've got to get through Severina Reign, and I've got to get through Court of the Blind King, but I've got my eye on you, Farsight. You're coming soon. Necromunda, I've got a Mike Brooks novel, Road to Redemption, and Will McDermott, author of the classic Cal Jericho novels, is doing one called Soulless Fury, which also sees the return, not debut, return of Mad Donna Yolante, which is a character from the old days of Necromunda, back when Necromunda was, well, a specialist game before specialist games were a thing, before it went on its massive hiatus and then revived. Mad Donna's been around for ages. Everyone sort of thought that she'd be gone forever because it was too on the nose as a reference, but no, she's got her own novel now, and being the classic Count Jericho author is just a fantastic touch. So well done, G-Dubs there. Now, Sigmar. Not as much here, and both of these actually belong to C.L. Werner. So we've got Lady Olinda in Lady of Sorrows. So Lady Olinda is the antagonist, but she is a character who we know probably very little about in comparison to the other Mortarchs, because Catacross basically gets a full battle tome's worth of backstory, and Manfred, Arkan, and Neferata, well, Neferata's got 2 novels. Arkan was a huge focus at the end times, and Manfred von Carstein is Manfred from flipping Carstein. Everyone knows who Manfred von Carstein is, or von Carstein, whatever. Everyone knows who they are. I know Linda is probably the least fleshed out Mortarch, or if she is fleshed out in the Nighthaunt Battle Tome, I don't think she's quite as much the centerpiece as Catacross is to the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. So her getting a novel, very much approve. Wouldn't be surprised to see a Catacross one in future. C.L. Werner has also done Prophet's Ruin, a Kharadron Overlords novel that follows on from Overlords of the Iron Dragon. So if you've read that, you'll probably read this. I haven't, because I have an Elf versus Dwarven bias. Sorry, but I'm sure it'll be very good. What little bits of Kharadron I've read in like Myths and Revenants and Gods and Mortals does suggest that they are very, very cool, and C.L. Werner does write them very, very well. Then we have Warhammer Horror, which is getting 2 novels and a short story anthology, if that's your thing. It's not mine, as mentioned with Warhammer Crime. Horror is not my genre, so in the politest way, skip. And then we have some anthologies as well, which are actually very interesting. So we've got Lord of the Dark Millennium, which is basically the Dan Abnett tribute collection, because it's all about Dan Abnett. All of his shorts put together across 22 years of work. So yeah, that will be some of the best literature, at least for consistency, because Dan Abnett's really, really good. You've also got Inferno Volume 5, if you're into Inferno. And probably the most important to me is The Hammer and the Eagle, Icons of Warhammer, which is essentially a, if you don't know what the lore is, start here book. Because it talks about being a place for helping people get to grips with Black Library, finding loads of AOS and 40k stories that will immerse you into the setting and showcase some of the heroes and the villains and the favourite factions. So it's basically a baby's first step into learning the lore of 40k and Sigmar, in theory. We'll see if it actually ends up being that. But for me, that's brilliant, because if you're someone who wants to get into the lore of X, Y, or Z, then where do you start? You could go Codex or Battletome. Alright, but what if you want to play a specific sub-faction within there? Okay, there might be a little bit in the Codex, but do they have their own standalone novel? Do they have their standalone series? If they're Space Marines, let's say, do you just do the 40k literature, or should you go back and read the 30k literature about the Legion and where they came from? And if you start reading the Legion lore, should you just read the entire Horus Heresy as well? And if you're doing Sigmar, should you go back and read some of the old fantasy novels from Warhammer Chronicles about where the legends came from? Should you read the End Times to see how the world came about? Should you read just the Battle Tome and be happy with it? Is there a novel for them? Do you need the rule book to flesh things out? Where do you start? And hopefully, this Hammer and the Eagle will be exactly what we need to give people a sort of, if you don't know what you're doing, start here book, which would be great. And then last but not least is audio dramas. So you've got a Space Wolves audio drama boxed set by David Annandale. So if you like your Space Wolves and are not me, then that might interest you. And probably, I think, more importantly, is Cypher. John French is doing a Cypher audio drama, which could be really, really interesting. Because Psychic Awakening 4, Ritual of the Damned, is coming out in January, I think. We saw that, and I'll talk about that at greater length in an upcoming video. So we know that the Dark Angels are involved in something very, very soon, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Fallen involved there. So Cypher, as this sort of toe the line between loyal and fallen, double agent, side switching, thingamabob, Cypher's brilliant, if written correctly. And I think John French, because he wrote Ahriman, I think he wrote the Solar War. I think John French could do a really good job. And he wrote the Inquisitor, the Herusian War novels as well. So I trust that. I think that's going to be really, really good. I look forward to it when it comes out, even if audio dramas are not my usual way of consuming media. Also got a few little things to finish. So Sisters of Battle, Warhammer Horror for Age of Sigmar, and is that Blackstone Fortress? Yes, Blackstone Fortress as well. So plenty going on the audio side as well. So, what a show! What a showcase for Black Library. There's an awful lot going on here, and I'm sure everyone will pick one thing as their highlight. Probably Siege of Terror 4 will be a huge highlight for many people. Watchers of the Throne 2, you've got The Return of Hell's Reach, you've got, maybe if you're more your Sigmar minded, you've got the Lady Linda novel, or you've got Oaths and Conquest, if you're someone like me who likes the sort of smattering of stories. You've got Farsight Empire of Lies, which is obviously for me a huge, huge deal. You've got Cypher as an audio drama, which could be really, really fascinating. There's something for everybody here. I'm not even mentioning Warhammer Crime. There's so much here for everybody, and I think it's going to be a really strong year for Black Library. That won't be everything they release, I suspect. There'll be a little bit more, but I can't wait for this year for Black Library. There's so much to come for us that we could be in for a real treat of revelations, information, and arcing plot threads to take us forward alongside the chugging thread that is the Psychic Awakening, giving us a sort of new sub-setting for us to play in. So, that has been my thoughts on the Black Library Weekender 2019, and I hope you enjoyed it. I realise it's been a month, but I still think it's useful to get my thoughts out there in long form, if only to organise them in my own head. But of course, that is just my opinion. Let me know in the comments below. What is your highlight of the show? What were you expecting to see that you didn't see? Or what came out a bit out of nowhere and that you're really excited for now that you know it exists? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love seeing what you have to say. We can have a bit of a discussion about it in the comments. Coming soon will be my thoughts on the recent Warhammer 40,000 reveals, the Warhammer 40,000 open day at the barest of minimums, and probably some other stuff too. I'm also working to do Warhammer the Old World as my thoughts on, and there is a plan in place for a Tactica Tutorialis episode before Christmas. So, plenty to look forward to, I suspect, and I hope you can join me for all of it. For now, thanks very much for watching. This has been Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Bye for now.